As this episode travels towards the end, what do we come to find? But the nightmare gets worse. Folks, can you imagine if there was this many evil keeners? Our school would be, a lot of hurt. Anyway, folks, as we turn our attention to today's activity, which deals with looking at both earthquakes and volcanoes through a worldwide lens, can you imagine if there was this many evil keeners? And if you could, which one would be the worst? Which one would be the most evil to deal with? I mean, let's face it, dealing with Mr. Keener on an everyday basis is difficult enough. Can you imagine if he actually turned into one of these villains? Anyway, turning our attention back to volcanoes and earthquakes, what we're going to do today, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to try and see if we can track the current active volcanoes and some major earthquakes and see where they actually have been located in the world, and maybe make a correlation between certain types of things like plates, or the convergent versus divergent boundaries, those boundaries of plate tectonics. So we're going to do this tracking activity where you're going to need to fill out a map and fill in some information on a Google data sheet. So on your direction sheet, what we're going to try and do is, obviously the purpose is to find the location of these active volcanoes and major earthquakes throughout the world, and hopefully see if we can come up with a pattern, which will then obviously help people to recognize, can we actually predict where earthquakes or possible major eruptions can occur. So let me throw out the actual assignment. Here it is in Google Classroom. The data sheet that I'm going to open up or show you momentarily is right here. You're going to have to eventually take a look at this Earth's Tectonic Plates PDF to try and see if there is a connection or a pattern. But ultimately, here is the directions that we're reviewing right now. And this Google drawing is where you can create your maps. There's also the map on a Google Doc or a Google Jamboard, whichever one you feel more comfortable creating. So let me point out a couple things. Here is the data table that everyone has access to, and I'll explain that momentarily. So let's head back to the directions. The first thing you're going to do is use different sites to find information, specifically where are these volcanoes located. And ultimately, you're going to plot where past earthquakes have been located. What I'm going to mention, folks, is you have access to Google Earth. It's going to be a huge asset to use in this assignment. You can also use volcanodiscovery.com. I'll show that to you right now. So let's say, actually, let me go back to this. Ultimately, you're going to want to find this information. What country the volcano is in, what year it erupted, the height, what type it is, composite, cinder, or shield, interesting fact about the volcano, and then the same thing for the earthquake information. Now, here's the data table that you're going to fill out for both these volcanoes. So this information is right here. And then this information for the earthquakes, here are the list of earthquakes. Now, when you open up the map, as I showed you before, the map will quite clearly show the different volcanoes and earthquakes. Now, let's say you want to find the first one, Arenal, for a volcano. Where in the world is Arenal? Well, what I'm going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the best thing to do is in Google Classroom, underneath Technology, here is the link to Google Earth. So you'll be able to access Google Earth. What I'm going to suggest is you come up to the search option, and let's say I wanted to know where Arenal is. All right, Arenal volcano. I click on it, it already gave me exactly what kind of volcano it is. It's a stratovolcano. I saw it real quick right here. You might get some information off of Wikipedia. Here's more info. You'll be able to figure out or get some major information just from Google Earth. The other thing you need to do is it takes me right to a very specific localized view of Arenal. What I would do is pan outward, and it will tell you exactly where it's located, or at least the country that it's located in. So it's in Central America. The problem is, let me come back like this, flip this around, facing north and south. Arenal is right here in Costa Rica. So you just caught that right here, Costa Rica, and you can notice South America is way down here. Let me pan out a little bit further. Okay, South America is what we're looking at here. Here is Costa Rica, and up north you can see Mexico, and ultimately here comes Florida, Louisiana, Texas, all that good stuff. Anyway, what I'm going to mention, folks, is you can get a lot of information from Google Earth. Use it. It's going to help you out. Now, a couple other things you could do is go to Volcano Discovery. I've given you that link in the assignment. So here is Volcano Discovery. As soon as it pops up, what you're going to notice, and it's being a little bit tricky with me here, not sure why, but if you check out Volcano Discovery, it's going to give you a couple different components inside the website that's going to give you databases and some links to different earthquakes and volcanoes. So let me come back to that. So ultimately what you're going to do, folks, is you're going to plot where all of these earthquakes and volcanoes are located. What I'm going to ask you to do is not to write the name, but you'll notice I have each of the earthquakes and volcanoes linked with a number. You're going to use a red number for the volcanoes, a purple one for the earthquakes, and you're going to plot the numbers throughout the country. So ultimately, when you start to plot them, you're going to place them where they're located. That's where Google Earth comes into play. Ultimately, though, after you fill out the information back on the data table, this data table here, what country it's located in, years it erupted, all this good stuff, you'll eventually submit this to me. But what I want to point out, the very last part, step 4 here, is to answer 3 questions. These questions are based on your observations of the map. So looking at the volcanoes, where did they end up, the majority of them being seen? At the middle of the continents or on the coastlines? Same thing with the earthquakes. And then question 3, you're going to have to deal with this document, which is in the assignment. And question 3 says, in terms of looking at the location of all these active volcanoes or earthquakes, what kind of boundaries are they going to be most likely found? Now, by reading this map, and the arrows tell you if it's going to be convergent or divergent, and then link it to your own map that you create, you'll be able to figure out these answers, convergent or divergent. Now, you're not going to put the answers on paper. What I am going to ask you to do is to go back out. Here's Volcano Discovery. I'll come back to that. In Google Classroom, this assignment right here, Tracking Volcanoes and Quakes, the Google form. I'm going to ask you to fill out this specific Google form at the end after you've gotten both the data table and the maps created. Now, let me show you volcano discovery. What I'm going to mention is inside the main page, you'll be able to find a lot of different information, past quakes. I would click on this earthquake archive. It's a database of the different earthquakes. You'll be able to get some decent information on the earthquakes. Same thing with the volcano database, an alphabetical list of your volcanoes. So if you're wondering where the volcano is and you don't want to use Google Earth, this is another resource you could obviously use. The Earthquakes Today, which is an offshoot of volcano discovery. I've linked this to you guys also. It gives you, much like a database, all of the different earthquakes that have that have uh, been created in the past. So, once again, my computer's being difficult. That upsets me to no end. However, I do want to point out the assignment itself is pretty straightforward. What I'm going to have you do, ladies and gentlemen, is make sure you follow the directions step by step. There essentially are 4 steps. So you're filling out this map, filling out the data table that has been submitted to you. What I would suggest, you're working with groups of 2, the people in your groups for classcraft. I would suggest you guys split up some of these volcanoes and some of these earthquakes. Have one person do like 7, 8, 9 of them. The other person does the other 7, 8, 9. Split them up, and then the other person does all the rest. You'll be able to then share your information and be able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, per se. So keep that in mind, folks. If you have any questions, obviously you're going to want to check with me. So keep in mind the entire assignment is right here. After you watch this screencast, you're creating the map based on these different volcanoes and earthquakes and filling out the data sheet in order to get the Google form completed. So keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, Mr. Farinelli saying all the best. And don't fear the evil keeners.